The shuttle descended through the upper atmosphere of the station, and Kevin Hayes watched the curved surface of Nexus Prime grow larger below him. The station was a massive structure, built by the Council centuries ago to house representatives from hundreds of species. It floated in empty space, far from any star, and served as the center of galactic politics and trade. Kevin sat still in his seat. His uniform was pressed and clean. Next to him sat Lisa Morton, the diplomat. She was checking her datapad one more time, making sure she had every fact correct about the territorial disputes in the Kepler sector. Behind them sat Jacob Cooper, the security officer. He was younger than Kevin but strong and alert. His eyes moved constantly, always watching for danger. Grace Washington and Daniel Foster sat in the back. Grace handled communications, and she was fluent in 12 different languages. Daniel was the technology specialist. He could fix almost anything and understood the systems that held the facility, council chamber together. The shuttle touched down on the landing platform. Air rushed out from the airlock as they stood and moved toward the exit. The station's interior was cold and metal. Long corridors stretched in all directions, lit by white panels set into the walls. Aliens of many shapes and sizes moved through the hallways. Some had 4 arms. Some moved on tentacles. Some floated without touching the ground. A representative from the Vexter met them at the entrance to the council chambers. His name was Handler Vrek, and he barely acknowledged the humans. He was tall, almost 7 feet, with gray skin and black eyes that seemed to look through people rather than at them. He gestured for them to follow and walked ahead without checking to see if they were keeping up. The council chamber was vast. The ceiling was so high that Kevin had to look up to see it clearly. The walls were smooth and white, and at the far end sat 7 massive chairs. 5 council members were already present. 3 of them were Vexter. One was a Carillion, a crystalline being made of living stone. The last was a neutral observer, a small mechanical construct that recorded everything for the historical archives. General Krall stood when they entered. He was the largest Vexter in the room, muscled and powerful. His skin was darker gray than Handler Vrek's, almost black in some places. He wore a uniform that showed his rank through symbols Kevin did not fully understand. When Krall stood, the other 2 Vexter council members stood as well. Kevin led his team to the chairs that had been set aside for them. They were smaller than the council chairs, positioned lower, facing the council members. This was intentional. The humans would literally look up at the council members as they spoke. It was a way of showing dominance without words. Lisa opened with the human position. She spoke clearly, stating facts about the border violations. Vexter ships had entered human space 17 times in the past month. Supply stations had been surveyed. Communications towers had been scanned. This was not normal behavior for a species that claimed to respect the treaty. General Krall listened without speaking. His black eyes did not blink. When Lisa finished, he leaned back in his chair and made a sound that Kevin understood was laughter, though it came from somewhere deep in the general's chest, almost like rocks grinding together. "You speak as though you matter," Krall said. His voice was deep and carried weight. Even through the translation device in Kevin's ear, the contempt was clear. Humans are soft creatures from a world of water and air. You have been spacefaring for only 200 years. The Vexter have dominated the stars for 10,000 years. Kevin did not move. He did not show anger or fear. He had prepared for this. He knew the Vexter valued strength and directness. "We matter because we exist," Kevin said, his voice calm. "We have a right to our space just as the Vexter have a right to yours. The treaty gives us this right." All parties agreed to it. Krall stood up. He was far taller than Kevin when they were both standing. He stepped down from his chair and walked toward the human delegation. His footsteps were heavy and slow. He stopped in front of Kevin. "The treaty is a courtesy," Kral said. "Not law. Law is what the strongest make it to be." Kevin stood up to face the general. He was much shorter, but he did not step back. "Then you will learn what humans are made of," Kevin said quietly. The general's hand moved faster than Kevin could follow. His palm struck Kevin's face with the force of a hammer blow. The sound echoed through the chamber. Kevin fell backward, catching himself on the chair. Blood filled his mouth. His lips split where a tooth had cut through the skin. The room went absolutely silent. Kevin touched his mouth with the back of his hand and looked at the blood. He straightened himself slowly and met Kral's eyes again. His jaw hurt. His head was ringing, but he did not look away. "You just made a serious mistake," Kevin said. Blood ran down his chin. "You touched someone you should never have touched. You showed all the species here that the Vexter do not believe in the laws you claim to follow. And you prove that you fear what we might become if you do not crush us now." Kral's hand came up again, but the Carillion Council member made a sound that stopped him. It was a deep, resonant tone that seemed to come from the stone itself. Hand Levrek appeared at Kral's side and pulled him back. "This session is concluded," the neutral observer announced. "The incident has been recorded and will be reported to all council members." Lisa grabbed Kevin's arm. Jacob was already moving toward the door, his hand near his weapon. Grace and Daniel flanked them as they turned to leave. The chamber remained silent as the humans walked out. Kevin did not run. He did not look frightened. He walked with his head high and his eyes forward. As they reached the corridor, his team clustered around him. Lisa pressed a cloth against his mouth to stop the bleeding. "That was insane," Jacob said, his voice sharp. "He could have killed you." "He showed us exactly what he is," Kevin replied. "And now everyone in this chamber knows it too. The question is what we do about it." Lisa looked at him with worry in her eyes. She knew what he was thinking. She had seen it before. That look that meant Kevin was already planning something dangerous. Behind them, they heard General Kral's voice echoing through the halls, laughing that grinding rock sound again. He was laughing because he believed he had proven his superiority. He did not understand what he had just done. He did not realize that his single act of violence had set in motion events that would change the course of human history. The news reached Earth before Kevin's shuttle did. Images of his bleeding face spread across every news channel, every social media platform, and every communication device on the planet. The clip was simple but powerful. A human stood facing an alien general. The alien struck him. The human bled. The human did not fall. The human did not apologize. Within 6 hours, 3 billion humans had seen the video. Within 12 hours, every major government on Earth had received emergency alerts from the United Nations Space Authority. The Vexter had officially withdrawn from all diplomatic channels and moved a military fleet toward Earth's orbital space. Kevin's shuttle landed at the United Nations Space Complex in Geneva. He was taken directly to the command center, where the director of the UNSA, Admiral Patricia Okonkwo, waited for him in a secure briefing room. "That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I have ever seen," Okonkwo said. She was a tall woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen decades of military service. She did not look angry. She looked impressed. "It was necessary," Kevin replied. His lip was swollen, but had stopped bleeding. Kral was never going to respect this. The moment he decided to use violence, he revealed that they see us as weak enough to hit without consequence. "And now they are coming," Okonkwo said. She turned to look at a map of Earth's orbital space. Red markers showed Vexter ship positions. They were moving closer every hour. "They have issued an ultimatum. Submit to Vexter authority or be destroyed." Kevin looked at the map for a long moment. He thought about Lisa, still on Nexus Prime, and the rest of his team. He thought about the 3 billion people watching, waiting to see what humanity would do. He thought about the choice in front of them, surrender or stand. "We need to activate the reserve fleets," Kevin said. "We need to call back every ship that is in the outer systems. We need to start manufacturing weapons now, around the clock. We need every factory on Earth converted to military production." "That is a declaration of war," Okonkwo said. "We are already at war," Kevin replied. "They just made it official." Within 24 hours, United Nations Security Council passed an emergency resolution. Every nation on Earth pledged resources to a unified defense effort. Scientists and engineers who had been working on advanced projects were reassigned to create countermeasures against Vexter technology. Soldiers were called back to active duty. Factories that had been quiet for years rumbled back to life. The work was desperate and urgent. Humans worked in shifts that lasted 18 hours. They worked because they understood what was at stake. If they failed, Earth would be bombarded from orbit. Cities would be destroyed. Billions would die. But the work was also driven by something else. The image of Kevin's bleeding face had awakened something in humanity. It was not rage, exactly. It was something deeper. It was the collective realization that they could not hide anymore. The galaxy had noticed them, and now they had to prove they belonged. Dr. Marcus Webb was a physicist who had spent his entire career studying Vexter technology from a distance. He worked in a laboratory that now felt more like a military installation. Around him, teams of scientists examined every specification, every blueprint, every known fact about Vexter ships and weapons. "Their shields regenerate on a frequency pattern," Marcus told his team, pointing to a holographic display. "They are efficient but not fast. There is a gap. If we hit them during the gap, we can penetrate." An engineer named Sarah Kim seized on the idea. She was young and brilliant, and she began designing a new type of missile. Instead of trying to hit harder than the Vexter, she designed a weapon that would hit faster. It would exploit that gap in the shield cycle. It would slip through the defense and strike the vulnerable systems underneath. Similar work was happening in factories and laboratories across Earth. Humans were not trying to match Vexter technology. They were trying to understand it well enough to work around it. They were looking for the weaknesses that no heavily armored species would expect to find in their own systems. General Kral watched the reports coming from Earth with confusion and then with something closer to concern. Humans were not surrendering. They were not pleading for mercy. They were mobilizing. Factories that appeared abandoned were suddenly producing weapons. Ships that had been in storage were being refitted and sent into space. And worst of all, humans were working together. There were no arguments about resources. There were no disagreements about strategy. Every human seemed to understand that this was about survival. Kral had faced hundreds of species in his long military career. Most of them panicked when they saw the size and power of the Vexter fleet. Some fought back half-heartedly. A few struggled briefly before surrender. But none of them had responded like this. None of them had mobilized their entire civilization in response to a single act of violence. He reported this to the Vexter High Command. He told them that humans were faster than expected, more adaptive than typical for a young species. He suggested a careful approach, a demonstration of power before full-scale invasion. The High Command did not listen. They saw only that a human had looked a Vexter general in the eye without breaking. That was intolerable. That had to be crushed before it spread to other species on Earth. Kevin was promoted to Admiral and given command of the newly formed Earth Defense Fleet. His first action was to visit the factories and laboratories. He talked to the workers and scientists. He did not give them orders about working harder or faster. Instead, he told them why it mattered. He told them about Lisa and the other diplomats, still trapped on Nexus Prime. He told them about the billions of children on Earth who had their whole lives ahead of them. He told them that what they were building was not just weapons, but hope. The workers listened. They understood. And they worked harder, not because they were told to, but because they finally understood. What their work meant thought the Vexter fleet drew closer. The ultimatum was ignored. The assault would come soon. And when it did, humanity would be ready. Not ready to conquer. Not ready to dominate. But ready to survive. Ready to show the galaxy that humans were not soft creatures to be dismissed. Ready to prove that underestimating humanity was the last mistake an enemy would make. The Vexter fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system like a dark cloud moving across the sky. 17 massive warships, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy an entire continent. They moved with slow precision, taking their time because they believed there was no rush. Humans were primitive. Humans would break quickly. Admiral Kevin Hayes stood in the command center of the Earth Defense Fleet, watching the red markers move across the tactical display. The main human fleet consisted of 12 ships, half the size of the Vexter vessels. In terms of raw firepower, the humans were outmatched 3-1. All ships report ready, the communications officer said. Her name was Elena Rodriguez, and her voice was steady and clear. We have received final confirmation from the ground-based defense stations. Missile arrays are powered up and waiting. Kevin nodded. He had studied the Vexter battle patterns for weeks. They always attacked the same way. They moved in formation, overwhelmed the enemy with coordinated fire, and moved on to the next target. They had never faced an opponent who did not try to match their firepower. They had never faced someone who would sacrifice ships to learn their patterns. Launch all fighter squadrons, Kevin commanded. I want them to harass the fleet, but not engage directly. Make them nervous. Make them reveal their defensive strategies. The first human fighters launched from the docking bays. They were fast and nimble, nothing like the massive Vexter ships. They came in at high speed, hitting the outer edges of the Vexter formation with precision missiles, then retreating before the larger ships could respond. The Vexter commander reacted as expected. He ordered his ships to close ranks and increase defensive fire. The massive ship cannons lit up the darkness of space, but the human fighters were too fast. They dodged, weaved, and attacked again. Some were hit and fell in pieces to the darkness. But each attack revealed more about the Vexter weapon systems. Each attack showed where the weak points were. Jacob Cooper was a fighter pilot, and he flew one of the first combat missions. His ship was called the Swift Wing, and it responded to his commands like an extension of his own body. He had trained for this his entire military career, but nothing prepared him for the reality of actually facing alien weapons fire. The Vexter lasers created walls of burning energy across the void. Jacob dove under one laser burst and came up on the opposite side of a Vexter ship. He launched a missile at a junction point where two shield generators met. The missile connected, and a small explosion bloomed against the dark hull. It was not enough to seriously damage the ship, but it was proof that penetration was possible. More fighters came in behind him. More missiles struck. The Vexter ships responded with increasing violence, and more human fighters fell. But the humans kept coming. They did not back down. They did not retreat. They learned with every exchange. After 4 hours of continuous assault, the Vexter commander made a tactical decision. The human fighters were costing him ship resources and time. He ordered a planetary assault. The Vexter would drop a landing force on Earth and destroy the planet's surface. The flying insects could be dealt with later. Kevin watched as the massive dropships separated from the Vexter fleet and began descending toward Earth's atmosphere. These were heavily armored vessels designed to breach planetary defenses. The Vexter had never faced anyone who could stop them once they committed to a landing. But Kevin had prepared for exactly this scenario. "Activate all surface defense systems," he ordered. "I want every missile battery targeting those dropships. Launch the orbital platforms." The response was immediate. Hundreds of missiles rose from the surface of Earth, targeted by computers and guided by the most advanced tracking systems humans had ever built. The sky above the landing zones lit up with explosions as the dropships tried to maneuver and return fire. 6 of the 12 landing craft were destroyed before they reached the atmosphere. The remaining 6 pushed through and descended toward the landing zones that had been selected in advance. The Vexter had chosen these zones because they were strategic positions. What they did not know was that humans had fortified every square kilometer around them. General Krall himself led the ground assault. He was confident in his warrior superiority. No human could stand against a Vexter combat soldier in direct combat. Humans were weaker, slower, and less heavily armored. This would be a slaughter. The dropship touched down in the pre-dawn darkness near the city of Phoenix, Arizona. Krall led his soldiers out into the night. The air was dry and hot, very different from the controlled environments of Vexter worlds. But Krall paid no attention to the environment. He was thinking about the battle ahead. The first warning came in the form of explosions. Mines placed on the landing field detonated, taking out 3 Vexter soldiers immediately. Krall dove behind a piece of the dropship as heavy fire came from all directions. Humans were everywhere, positioned in trenches and fortified positions they had built in the darkness. Jacob Cooper was there, leading a team of 8 soldiers. He had received word that the main landing zone was under his command, and he had spent 3 weeks preparing it. Every position was defended. Every approach was covered by overlapping fields of fire. Every avenue the Vexter might take was anticipated. The Vexter soldiers were heavily armored and powerful, but they were predictable. They tried to overwhelm the human positions through sheer firepower. Krall ordered charge after charge, believing that Vexter strength would eventually overcome human defenses. But the humans did not try to win through strength. They won through positioning, through tactics, through understanding the ground and the enemy. Jacob's team had calculated the exact angle at which Vexter armor was weakest. They had designed specific munitions to exploit those weak points. They had practiced the movements until they could do them in complete darkness. When the Vexter soldiers came at them, the humans were ready. After 3 hours of fighting, General Krall was surrounded. His soldiers were falling. His superior firepower was useless against an enemy that had learned to fight him on their own terms. He tried to fall back to the dropship, but it was already heavily damaged and surrounded. He tried to call for air support, but the human fleet had taken control of the space directly above them. For the first time in his career, General Krall understood fear. He was trapped on an alien world, outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and facing soldiers who were actually willing to die to stop him. Krall drew his sidearm and prepared to make a final stand. But Jacob Cooper did not come at him with weapons drawn. Jacob came with 6 soldiers, all of them standing with weapons pointing at the general. Jacob was bleeding from a wound on his shoulder, but his aim was steady. "You are surrounded," Jacob said in clear, simple English. His translation device would convert the words to Vexter. "If you surrender, you will be treated as a prisoner of war. If you fight, you will die." General Krall looked at the human soldiers around him. He looked at Jacob, this young human who had defeated him in combat. He lowered his weapon. He had expected humans to be soft and weak. Instead, they had proven to be the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. They were willing to learn and adapt and fight with absolute commitment. Krall dropped his weapon. He knelt in the dust of an alien world. He had come to conquer. He was leaving as a prisoner. The underground facility was built 300 meters below the surface of the desert. It had been constructed decades ago as a backup command center for the military, but it had never been used. Now it served a different purpose. It held the most important prisoner in human history. General Krall was placed in a secure chamber. The walls were steel and glass. Behind the glass, cameras watched constantly. The room had a bed, a toilet, a sink, and a chair. The temperature was maintained at a level that was comfortable for Vexter biology. The air was filtered to provide the exact composition his species preferred. Kevin Hayes reviewed the orders he had given to the guards and medical staff. The general was to be treated with respect. He was to be fed well. He was to be provided with medical treatment for his wounds. If he needed anything for his comfort, he was to be given it. Kevin wanted this to be clear. Humans were not barbarians. Humans honored their prisoners. The first interrogation session took place 72 hours after Krall's capture. Kevin went into the chamber alone. He carried no weapons. He carried no recording devices. It was just the two of them, the human and the Vexter general. Krall stood when Kevin entered. His wounds had been treated. His body was healing, but his mind was still processing the reality of his situation. He had expected to be executed or tortured. Instead, he had been given medical care and comfort. It did not match anything he knew about how the universe worked. "I want to understand," Kevin said. He sat in a chair across from the general. "Why did you come here? What did you think would happen?" Krall was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different from before. The pride and arrogance had been stripped away by defeat and confusion. "You are a young species," Krall said. "Your people have been in space for only 200 years. You do not have the technology. You do not have the discipline. You do not have the strength that comes from 10,000 years of military tradition. But we have something else," Kevin said. "We have willingness to learn. We have willingness to sacrifice. We understand that sometimes the only way to win is to change everything we thought we knew about fighting." "You should not have survived," Krall said. It was not an argument. It was a statement of fact that he was struggling to understand. "My ships are superior. My weapons are superior. My soldiers are stronger. Strength is not the only thing that matters," Kevin replied. "Adaptation matters. Understanding your enemy matters. Working together matters. When your people came here, you believed you already knew everything you needed to know about how the fight would go. You did not believe you had to learn anything. That was your mistake." Krall looked at the human across from him. This creature was weaker than him physically. Krall could have easily killed him with a single blow. But Kevin sat there with complete calmness, talking to him as though they were equals. Krall realized that Kevin had no fear of him. Kevin understood that physical strength meant nothing when you were already in chains. "What will you do with me?" Krall asked. "That depends on you," Kevin said. "You can face trial for war crimes. You can face execution. Or you can help me prevent more bloodshed. How can I do this?" Krall asked. "By telling your people the truth," Kevin said. "By telling them that humans are not weak. By telling them that trying to dominate us was a mistake. By recommending that the Vexter seek peace instead of continued war." Krall felt something twist inside him. What Kevin was asking was political suicide. The Vexter High Command would see his words as weakness. They would strip him of rank and title. They would exile him or execute him. But if he did not do this, thousands of Vexter soldiers would die in a war they could not win against an enemy they did not understand. "If I do this," Krall said slowly, "what guarantee do I have that my people will be treated with mercy?" "No guarantee," Kevin said honestly. "But I'm offering you the chance to save lives. That is all any of us can do." We make choices that we hope will lead to better futures. You can make that choice now. Kevin left the interrogation chamber and went to the command center. The news from space was better than expected. The remaining Vexter ships, having lost contact with General Krall and the ground forces, had withdrawn from Earth orbit. They were maintaining position at the edge of the solar system, but they were not attacking. The initial invasion had been stopped completely. The impact rippled through the galaxy. Species that had lived under Vexter dominance for centuries heard the news and realized something had changed. Humans were not supposed to be capable of this. The humans were not supposed to be able to defeat a Vexter invasion force. But they had. And now the galaxy knew it. Delegations from other species began arriving at Earth. They came with offers of trade, with offers of alliance, with offers of technology and support. The Valantian Federation sent a ship carrying scientific experts. The Quarthy Collective offered military cooperation. Even species that had been neutral in galactic affairs began reaching out to humans. The Galactic Council sent an official request for Kevin and a delegation to return to Nexus Prime for emergency negotiations. The rules had changed. Humanity was no longer a minor species to be ignored. Humanity was now a power that other species had to respect. Lisa Morton was released from the detention facility, where she had been held. She was brought to the shuttle bay and taken into Kevin's arms. She had been terrified during the invasion, watching from the station as reports came in of massive battles. But she had never doubted that Kevin would find a way. She had seen him face down General Krall without fear. She knew he had the kind of mind that could find a solution where others saw only impossibility. Kevin brought Lisa to the interrogation chamber to see Krall. The general looked at her, and something passed between them. She was one of the diplomats he had wanted to intimidate. She was one of the humans he had believed was beneath his notice. Now she stood looking at him as a free being, while he remained a prisoner. "The council requests your testimony," Kevin told Krall. "They want to hear from you about what happened. They want to hear from you about what humans are truly capable of. And if I refuse?" Krall asked. "Then you will face trial, and other voices will tell the story," Kevin said. "But I think you know what the right choice is. I think you know that the only way to protect your people is to help them understand what you have learned." Krall nodded slowly. He understood. He had been beaten by an enemy he had never expected to face. But more importantly, he had been beaten by a truth he could no longer ignore. Humans were not soft. Humans were not weak. Humans were dangerous. And the only way forward was to acknowledge this and seek peace instead of continued conflict. The council chamber at Nexus Prime was packed with representatives from more species than had gathered there in a century. News of the human victory had spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had never considered humans important were now paying attention. Species that had feared Vexter dominance were now hopeful that things might change. Kevin Hayes stood in the center of the chamber. He was wearing his dress uniform, and his stance was calm and confident. General Krall stood beside him, no longer in chains but under heavy guard. This was an unprecedented moment in galactic history. A captured general would voluntarily testify about his own defeat. The Vexter High Command was represented by a delegation of 3 senior officers. They looked angry and ashamed. Their greatest general had been defeated by a species they had viewed as primitives. This was not just a military defeat. This was a blow to their entire understanding of how the universe worked. "General Krall will now make a statement," the council chairman announced. He was an ancient Corellian, a crystalline being who had served the council for 300 years. Krall stepped forward. His voice was steady, but Kevin could see the effort it took. The general was risking everything. When he finished speaking, the Vexter High Command would likely disown him. His military career was over. But Kral had decided that saving lives was worth the personal cost. "I came to this world believing humans were weak," Kral began. "I came here believing that Vexther's strength would overcome any resistance. I was wrong. Humans possess qualities that no amount of military superiority can match. They possess the ability to learn from every encounter. They possess the willingness to sacrifice everything for those they protect. And they possess something that no weapon can overcome: the determination to survive." He paused and looked directly at the Vexther delegation. "The humans defeated us not through superior technology, but through superior strategy. They defeated us not through greater strength, but through greater willingness to adapt. If the Vexther continue to pursue this conflict, we will face extinction. The only path forward is peace." The chamber erupted in sound. Species made vocalizations in their own languages, all speaking at once. The Carillion chairman raised his hand for silence, and the chamber quieted. "Kevin Hayes, you may speak," the chairman said. Kevin stepped forward. He had thought carefully about what to say. He understood that this moment would define humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. "We did not come to the galaxy seeking conquest," Kevin said. "We came seeking our place among the stars. The attack on Earth was not an invasion we provoked. It was an answer to a simple act of respect that was denied us. But that act of violence united our people. It showed us that we are capable of more than we believed. It showed us that we have strength that comes not from weapons, but from our hearts." He looked at Kral. General Kral came to destroy us. Instead, he taught us. By attacking us, he unified us. By underestimating us, he proved that our greatest strength lies in our ability to surprise those who think they understand us completely. Lisa Morton stood in the diplomatic section. She was watching Kevin with pride and something deeper. This man had faced down an alien general with nothing but his own courage. Now he was facing down the entire galactic power structure with the same steadiness. "We are not asking for dominance," Kevin continued. "We are asking for respect. We are asking to be treated as equals. And we are offering something that all species need: the knowledge that there is another species now that will stand for those who cannot stand for themselves. Humanity will be the protector of the young and the weak. Humanity will be the species that refuses to allow bullying or domination. This is what we learned from being attacked. This is what we will bring to the galaxy." The voting took place over the next 3 hours. The Galactic Council had to decide whether to recognize humans as full members with equal standing. The vote was almost unanimous. Only the Vexther abstained, unable to bring themselves to vote for the species that had defeated them, but also unable to vote against it after Kral's testimony. Earth was granted full status as a galactic member. Humanity was recognized as a spacefaring species with the right to protection under galactic law. Trade agreements were offered. Military alliances were proposed. Most importantly, no one would ever again treat humans as primitives or weaklings. The celebration on Earth lasted for days. People filled the streets. They were not celebrating victory or conquest. They were celebrating survival. They were celebrating the moment when their species had stood up and refused to be pushed down. They were celebrating the knowledge that humanity had earned, respect through courage and determination. In the underground facility in the desert, General Kral was making final preparations. He had chosen to remain on Earth rather than return to his people. The Vex, their high command, had indeed disowned him. He was no longer a general. He was no longer part of their military structure. But he had found something unexpected. He had found respect. Kevin visited him on the morning before Kral was to be released. The general would return to Vexther space, but not as a prisoner or an exile. He would return as an ambassador, a voice calling for peace and understanding. "You gave up everything," Kevin said. "I gave up position and title," Kral replied. "But I gained something more valuable. I gained the knowledge that I was wrong. I learned to look at another being and see strength instead of weakness. Humans have taught me that the universe is larger and more complex than I ever understood. Will your people listen? Kevin asked. Some will, Krall said. Some will take centuries to accept what happened here. But the memory will remain. The memory of the day a human stood up to a vex their general and refused to break. The memory of how one small species united and turned certain defeat into impossible victory. Over time, that memory will change how the galaxy sees itself. Krall extended his hand to Kevin. It was a human gesture, something Kevin had shown him during the months of negotiations. Kevin took his hand, and they stood there together. The human and the alien, the victor and the vanquished, bound by something that transcended both of them. In the council chamber at Nexus Prime, a new section was being added to the historical records. It would contain the testimony of General Krall. It would contain the accounts of the humans who fought in the defense of Earth. It would contain information about the species that had refused to be conquered, that had taken their greatest enemy and turned him into an ambassador for peace. Kevin stood once more in the council chamber where he had watched his lip bleed as an alien general struck him. But now the chamber was different. Now humans had a seat at the table. Now Kevin stood as an equal. Now the galaxy understood that underestimating humanity was the last mistake an enemy would ever make. The story of the slap that changed everything would be told for thousands of years. It would be a reminder that strength comes in many forms. It would be a reminder that the mightiest weapons can be defeated by the determination of those who refuse to accept defeat. It would be the story that defined humanity's place in the stars. Not as conquerors, but as the species that chose to face darkness with light, violence with persistence, and hatred with the hope that even enemies could learn and change. The galaxy had finally understood what Kevin Hayes had known from the beginning. Humans were not soft. Humans were not weak. Humans were something far more powerful than any weapon. Humans were alive in a way that no other species fully grasped. And when you threatened what they loved, they would move heaven and earth to protect it. They would learn. They would adapt. They would overcome. And they would do it together, standing as one, refusing to break, refusing to surrender, proving to the universe that humanity belonged among the stars.